the end of that segment. Now we'll go to this segment. So here we go with another one. Oh, give that a little Viagra. Oh, Ed, it's a wiener joke. You know, friends, there are a lot of things that you can look at on YouTube, and YouTube is a valuable tool if you know what you're looking for. Well, if you're new to the rockabilly, rock and roll, swing music, western swing thing, I can recommend a few things to you, and one thing that I didn't know a thing about this band until I found them on the internet, and they were a band called the Tielman Brothers. The Tielman Brothers were a band from Indonesia, and they started in the 1950s. Look for a clip of theirs on some television show. They're doing a song called Rollin' Rock. If you want to see a four-piece band dressed in matching white jackets and bolo ties and white shoes, just blowing their brains out on an instrumental 12-bar blues, this is the team to beat. And on top of that, they're Indonesian, so they've got that thick, wavy black hair. They've got these giant pompadours, and they are just losing their minds. And keep in mind, this clip is from 1958. Well, the four Tielman brothers lasted up into the late 90s, playing music until their death. Reggie Tielman died in 2014. Lulu Tielman in 1994. I can't even read my own handwriting, but I think one of them was named Ponfan, and he died in 2000, and brother Andy passed away in 2011. One of their big breaks came in 1958 when they appeared at the Brussels World's Fair, and they definitely stole the stage from a Hawaiian band that was also sharing the stage with them. So take a look at the Tielman Brothers doing a song called Rollin' Rock. That's your assignment this time around on YouTube. Boom. Okay, there we go, that's that. Now we're going to do the big one. So let me just have everybody take a drink of booze, because this one's going to be big. Cheers! Tell your friends you were out drinking at the Chicago Vintage Show last night. All right. Oh my. Oh my. You are tuned to the Chicago Vintage Show. We come to you from the outer space in beautiful Berwyn, Illinois, also known as Music Suburb, USA. There's something that every time I get to this part of the program, I feel like I've really got to hunker down and take the bull by the horns. I need to address an issue that people who have gotten into rockabilly and vintage stuff in the 2000s might not know that this happened, but this is a fact of life. If you're like me, and if you're old enough, if you're a guy who came onto the rockabilly scene in the early 1980s, somewhere along the way, you grew a giant pompadour. Just an enormous pompadour, a head of hair that looked like you had a full-size loaf of bread sitting on the top of your head. And young guys now will look at you and they'll go, "What were you thinking? What was going through your mind when you decided to have this aerodynamic, this hood ornament going on the top of your head? What was the thinking there?" Well, I'll tell you what the thinking was there. The whole thing comes down to one thing and one thing only. There was no such thing as rockabilly music anywhere near the mainstream in, let's say, 1981. And then a record came out by three guys who were, hang on, I'm looking for something, that were Americans who had gone to Europe, who had gone to England, and they became known as the Stray Cats. Well, there you go. I stole this record from a radio station where I was working when this record came out. This is the British import of their first album. And the reason that this record changed so many lives was because of this photograph of Brian Setzer. A lot of guys went out and they got the Stray Cats tattoo on their arm. And then pretty much every guy who had ever seen this photograph said, "That's it, I gotta grow a giant pompadour. I've gotta have hair up to the sky to show people that I love rockabilly music." The reason that we did that was because it was the 80s. And in the 80s, you had bands with eccentric hairdos. Let's just start at the top with Flock of Seagulls. Well, because of that 80s new wave thing, and that's where a lot of us rockabilly guys got started, we said, well, we're going to take it to the max. We're going to make it just as extreme as humanly possible. And we're going to wear the old suits, but we're going to have giant pompadours. We wanted to look like Tony Curtis. We wanted to look like Elvis Presley. We wanted to look like all those guys we'd seen in all those 50 movies. Look at a picture of Bobby Rydell in about 1961. He's got this enormous conch going on. We wanted to look like Esquerita. Go look for a picture of Esquerita and you'll go, Little Richard was nothing compared to the hairdo that Esquerita was packing, because it was enormous. Well, I also got lucky. I was living in Iowa at the time, and a band from Chicago showed up, and they were a band called the Hellbillies. Bobby Wall, Jimmy Newton, and Ricky Dubrow. Those three guys had massive pompadours as far as I was concerned. And that young man right there, Bobby Wall, I still remember standing in a bar next to him and going, Bobby, how do you make your hair do that? And he taught me the secret of the giant pompadour, and I followed suit. Well, the first time I ever came to Chicago, the first guy that I met, and he had a spectacular pompadour, was of course a very young, very fabulous Eric Kish right there in the middle. I couldn't believe this guy. He had an enormous head of jet black hair, and I said, I want to be that guy. So I started growing an enormous pompadour. And every one of us in our crowd did exactly the same thing. We all had massive pompadours because we wanted to show people that we were loud, we were proud, we were standing tall. We loved rockabilly music to the most extreme, and we weren't going to let anybody stop us. Well, this leads us to yours truly. At one point, I had kind of a full head of hair. I still have what they call a 5 head. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I was greasing my hair when I was in kindergarten in 1966. You know how they say you take a little dabble, do you? I would take about 6 dabs and work it in, and boom, off I would go. Well, every guy I know has a story or a photograph of himself with giant hair. My friend Louis Vinci from New Jersey. If you say, Louis, do you have a picture of yourself with a giant pompadour? He reaches to his wallet and flips it open, and there's a picture of him from the 80s with the giant pompadour. Yours truly, I busted it off too, man. I still own that shirt. I still own that necktie. I wish I still had that suit. I was standing proud, man. And then in 1985 into 1986, and we've got a clip of this, I went to Anchorage, Alaska, where I worked for a period of time on a music television channel. And I walked into that job with a flat top haircut. 10 months later, I walked out of there with the most glorious pompadour of my life. One time years ago, I was having a conversation with with Dave Alvin. Dave Alvin, formerly of the Blasters, Dave Alvin of Dave Alvin and the Guilty Men. And Dave allowed as how when the Blasters were in their prime in the early 80s, they used to have hair contests within the band to see who could grow the most giant, most outrageous pompadour. All of us who came up in the 80s, we did it because we loved rockabilly music. Well, now we're older and we kind of let the top down a little bit, except for my good friend. He was in my wedding party, Mr. Carl Schreiber from the band the Cadillac Casanovas. Carl, to this day, still wears it tall, loud, and proud. As we used to say back in them there days, and I still believe it to be the absolute God's honest truth, the higher the hair, the closer to God. Thank you. We'll edit that and it'll come out just spectacular. But thank you for tolerating me. I really appreciate it.